It began, as most heartbreaks do, with a whisper of something too good to be true. I remember the exact moment I saw Liam across the crowded coffee shop, the Daily Grind, a place I usually frequented for its reliable Wi-Fi and surprisingly strong espresso. He was hunched over a laptop, a mess of dark curls falling into intense blue eyes, and a concentration furrow etched between his brows. He looked like an artist, a philosopher, or perhaps both, a stark contrast to the parade of bland, predictable suits I usually encountered in my daily life as a struggling freelance graphic designer. My friend, Sarah, nudged me. "Someone's caught your eye, Maya." I scoffed, trying to appear nonchalant, but my gaze kept drifting back to him. There was an aura about him, a quiet intensity that pulled me in. He ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no cream, just like me. A small, insignificant detail, but in that moment, it felt like a cosmic alignment. We exchanged a few awkward smiles over the next few days, then a tentative hello, and soon, those hellos stretched into hours of conversation. He was a writer, he told me, working on a novel about urban alienation. His voice was a low rumble, intelligent and thoughtful, and he spoke with a captivating sincerity that disarmed me entirely. He listened, truly listened, to my ramblings about typography and client headaches, offering insightful comments that made me feel seen, understood. It was intoxicating. Our dates were simple, long walks through the botanical gardens, late-night talks on my fire escape under a canopy of city lights, cooking atrocious meals together in my tiny apartment kitchen. He'd leave little notes for me, a poem scrawled on a napkin, a silly doodle, a thoughtful observation about something I'd mentioned days ago. He remembered everything. He cared about everything. Or so I thought. My life, which had felt a little flat, a little monochrome, suddenly burst into vibrant color. He was the splash of crimson, the streak of emerald, the golden light illuminating everything. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, warned me gently. "He seems a little too perfect, Maya. Just, be careful." I brushed her off, convinced she just didn't understand. How could she? This was different. This was him. He made me believe in a future I hadn't dared to dream of before. He talked about us moving into a bigger place, a loft with exposed brick and plenty of natural light for my design work, a quiet nook for his writing. He spoke of traveling the world, experiencing different cultures, of growing old together, watching the sunrise from a porch swing. I was a romantic at heart, and he tapped into that deeply buried well of longing. He filled every space, every quiet moment, with his presence. I felt myself becoming more open, more vulnerable than I'd ever been. It was a beautiful, terrifying freefall, and I welcomed it with open arms. He was my anchor, my muse, my everything. Or so I believed. The first crack in our seemingly perfect facade was so subtle, I almost missed it. It was a Tuesday evening, and we were supposed to have dinner at his place. Liam had a knack for making even the most basic pasta dish taste gourmet, and I always looked forward to our quiet evenings together, a balm to the chaos of my work week. I'd texted him around 5 to say I was leaving the office, and he'd replied almost instantly, "Can't wait, love." But when I arrived at his apartment building an hour later, a soft glow emanating from his living room window, something felt off. The air was thick with an unfamiliar tension, a palpable unease that prickled my skin. I knocked, and waited. And waited. Finally, the door creaked open, just a sliver, and Liam peered out, his eyes wide and a little panicked. "Maya. Hey, I wasn't expecting you so soon." His voice was strained, unnatural. My eyebrows furrowed. "It's 7 p.m., Liam." "We said 7. Is everything okay?" He hesitated, then opened the door wider. Yeah, everything's fine. Just a little chaotic in here. My cousin, Mark, just dropped by unexpectedly. He's a bit of a whirlwind." As he stepped aside, I caught a glimpse of his living room. It was surprisingly neat. Almost too neat for a chaotic whirlwind visit. No discarded jackets, no half-eaten snacks, no signs of recent disruption. And there, on the coffee table, was a sleek, unfamiliar laptop, not his usual clunky one, and a stack of papers I didn't recognize. Before I could process it, Liam was ushering me into the kitchen, his arm around my waist, a little too tight, a little too distracting. "Dinner's almost ready, just need to finish the sauce. Mark's just in the bathroom, he'll be out in a minute." The entire evening felt off. Mark never appeared. Liam kept making excuses. "Oh, he must have stepped out for a call," or "he's probably just finishing up." But I didn't hear a door close, didn't hear any movement other than Liam's nervous bustling. And his eyes, those intense blue eyes I loved, kept darting to the living room, a subtle flicker of apprehension in their depths. When I finally left, a vague sense of unease settled in my stomach. It wasn't anything concrete, just a collection of small inconsistencies that, individually, meant nothing, but together, formed a faint, unsettling hum. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe his cousin was just incredibly tidy, or incredibly quiet. But the feeling lingered, a tiny, persistent whisper of doubt in the back of my mind. The whispers, once faint, began to grow louder, morphing into an insistent murmur. Liam started becoming increasingly elusive. His phone, once left casually on the counter, was now always in his pocket, face down. He'd step out of the room to take calls, his voice hushed, almost conspiratorial. When I'd ask who it was, he'd offer vague answers, just a client, or my agent. His work habits also shifted. He'd always been disciplined, but now, he'd spend entire nights awake, typing furiously, only to claim he was stuck on a chapter. He'd pull away during our cuddles, his body tense, his mind clearly somewhere else. I tried to talk to him about it. "Is everything okay, Liam? You seem distracted." He'd brush it off, a forced smile on his face. "Just the pressure of the deadline, love. You know how it is." But I did know how it was. I was a freelancer too. Deadlines were stressful, yes, but they didn't turn you into a ghost. One afternoon, I stopped by his apartment unexpectedly, hoping to surprise him with his favorite coffee and a much-needed break from his intense writing session. I had a key, a testament to the level of trust we had built, or so I thought. As I quietly unlocked the door, I heard voices from inside. One was Liam's, low and urgent. The other was a woman's. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, my hand still on the doorknob. "You have to understand, I can't just disappear," Liam was saying, his voice strained. She's expecting me." A woman's laugh, a little sharp, a little dismissive, cut him off. "Oh, darling, you've said that before. You always come back." My breath hitched. "Darling?" The blood drained from my face. I stood there, rooted to the spot, listening to the muffled conversation, my mind racing, trying to make sense of the sudden, sickening plunge in my stomach. It couldn't be what I thought it was. It couldn't be. Liam was perfect. Our love was perfect. The air in the hallway felt suddenly suffocating. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The muffled voices continued, a twisted symphony playing out behind the door that separated me from a truth I didn't want to face. I heard Liam's voice again, softer now, almost pleading. "It's just, she's starting to ask questions. I can't keep this up indefinitely." The woman's response was a low murmur, then another sharp, brittle laugh. The sound scraped against my raw nerves. I felt a prickling sensation behind my eyes, the unwelcome sting of tears threatening to spill. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of denials and desperate hopes. Maybe it was his sister? A colleague? But the tone, the intimacy in their hushed conversation, painted a far darker picture. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to turn around and pretend I'd never heard a thing, never suspected. But a morbid curiosity, a desperate need for confirmation, held me captive. I edged closer to the door, my ear pressed against the cool wood, straining to catch every word. "So, the little artist is getting antsy?" the woman purred, her voice dripping with an almost condescending amusement. "Don't worry, darling. You're far too valuable to let go." Valuable? The word struck me like a physical blow. What did that even mean? Liam's reply was too low to discern, but I heard the woman sigh dramatically. "Look, we've been over this. It's a temporary arrangement. Soon, very soon, we can make things permanent. Just a few more weeks. Can you manage that, for me?" My stomach lurched. Temporary arrangement? Permanent? The pieces, though still fragmented, were beginning to fall into a terrifying pattern. I felt a cold dread spread through my veins. This wasn't about a sister, or a colleague. This was something far more insidious, something that twisted my perfect love story into a grotesque parody. My hand trembled as I slowly, silently, removed my key from the lock. I couldn't confront him now, not like this, not when my heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I needed to understand. I needed to know the full extent of the betrayal. I needed proof. And I needed to do it without him knowing I was even there. With a silent prayer for strength, I retreated, my footsteps barely audible on the carpeted hallway, leaving the quiet horror of his apartment behind me. The next few days were a blur of forced smiles and internal turmoil. I was a ghost in my own life, moving through the motions, nodding at Liam's reassurances, feigning interest in his latest breakthrough on his novel. Each touch, each kiss, felt like a lie, a performance designed to keep me blind. The confusion had curdled into a simmering hurt, a constant ache in my chest. I couldn't bring myself to confront him, not yet. I needed evidence, something undeniable, something that would leave no room for his eloquent deceptions. My graphic design work, usually a source of comfort and creative escape, became a mundane chore. My mind was consumed by Liam, by the chilling possibility that the man I loved, the man who had painted my world in such vibrant hues, was a master of illusion. I started observing him with a detached, clinical eye, analyzing every gesture, every fleeting expression. I noticed the way his gaze would linger on his phone, even when he pretended not to be looking. I noted the specific times he'd suddenly claim he needed fresh air or inspiration and disappear for an hour or two. My intuition, once dismissed as irrational paranoia, now screamed at me. One evening, as we sat on his couch, supposedly watching a movie, he drifted off to sleep, his phone slipping from his grasp and landing between the cushions. My heart hammered. This was it. This was my chance. My hands trembled as I reached for it, my fingers brushing against the cool metal. His lock screen was a photo of us, smiling, arms entwined, a cruel mockery of the truth I suspected. I swallowed hard, a metallic taste in my mouth. I didn't know his password. A wave of despair washed over me. Then, I remembered something he'd told me in an offhand comment months ago, something about using a date he'd never forget. I tried our anniversary, my birthday, his birthday. Nothing. Finally, on a whim, I typed in the date of our first kiss. The screen flickered, then unlocked. My breath hitched. A rush of adrenaline, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. My thumb hovered over his messaging apps. I felt like an intruder, a detective violating the most sacred of trusts, but the alternative, remaining in this agonizing limbo, was unbearable. I opened WhatsApp. My eyes scanned the chat history, my heart a drumbeat in my ears. And there it was. A recent conversation, pinned to the top, with a contact simply labeled E. The chat with E unfolded like a horror movie in slow motion. My fingers, trembling so violently I could barely hold the phone steady, scrolled through message after message, each one a dagger to my heart. He wasn't a client, an agent, or a long-lost cousin. It was Eleanor. And Eleanor wasn't just a friend, she was clearly more. The messages were explicit, laced with a sickening intimacy that twisted my stomach into knots. Pet names. Inside jokes, plans for secret rendezvous. My perfect, loving Liam had a whole other life, a whole other woman. Can't wait to see you tonight, darling. Maya's going to her art class, perfect timing. One message from Liam read, dated just last week. My art class. He knew my schedule, knew exactly when I'd be out of his hair, out of the way. Another message from Eleanor, did she suspect anything when you went to Paris? You were gone for so long. Paris? He had told me he was on a writer's retreat in a remote cabin upstate, unplugging, getting inspired. He'd even sent me photos of snow-covered trees and a cozy fireplace. All lies. Every single one of them. The cabin, the deadlines, the sudden cousin who never materialized, it was all a meticulously constructed facade. He had built this elaborate lie, brick by agonizing brick, and I, in my naive, blinding love, had furnished it with my trust, my hopes, my future. The pain was a physical entity, a searing heat that spread through my chest, making it hard to breathe. The confusion was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. And the hurt was so profound it bordered on numbness. I felt humiliated, a fool, a pawn in some twisted game. I wanted to scream, to throw his phone across the room, to wake him and unleash the torrent of anger and agony that was boiling inside me. But then, a different emotion surfaced, one I hadn't expected, a chilling sense of calm. A quiet resolve. The immediate, instinctual urge for a dramatic confrontation began to fade, replaced by a strategic coldness. I needed to understand the full extent of this deception. What else was he hiding? Who was this Eleanor, and what was her role in this elaborate charade? My mind, usually prone to emotional outbursts, shifted into a calculating gear. I had to play this carefully. I had to gather more information. And then, I would make him pay. Not with tears, not with accusations, but with something far more devastating. I scrolled further, every word a fresh wound, every revelation hardening my resolve. This wasn't just betrayal, this was an art form of manipulation. And I was about to become the artist of his downfall. I spent the rest of the night in a silent agony, my mind racing, dissecting every memory, every conversation, every lingering doubt. The initial shock had given way to a chilling focus. I returned his phone to its place, my movements precise, my face a mask of composure. When Liam stirred beside me a few hours later, he pulled me closer, mumbling something about missing me. I stiffened, forcing myself to relax into his embrace, fighting the urge to recoil. The touch that once brought me comfort now felt like a venomous sting. I hated him. I hated his touch, his lies, his very presence. But I also knew I couldn't let him see it. Not yet. I spent the next few days in a state of heightened awareness, playing the role of the oblivious, loving girlfriend, while secretly gathering information. My phone became my weapon. I started cross-referencing dates and times from his messages with my own calendar, piecing together the timeline of his double life. His writer's retreat in Paris aligned perfectly with a major design conference I had attended, leaving him ample time for his affair. His urgent client meetings were clearly rendezvous with Eleanor. I discovered she was a wealthy art collector, a patron of various galleries, and a prominent figure in the city's elite circles. This explained the valuable comment I had overheard. Liam wasn't just having an affair, he was clearly using me, and possibly Eleanor, for some greater gain. But what? My research extended beyond his phone. I discreetly searched his apartment when he was out, a knot of revulsion in my stomach with every item I touched. In his desk drawer, tucked beneath a stack of old manuscripts, I found a second phone, a burner phone, its existence a cold, undeniable confirmation of his calculated deception. This phone held even more damning evidence, encrypted messages, offshore bank accounts, and shockingly, emails related to a sophisticated art forgery scheme. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal. He wasn't a struggling writer, he was a con artist. The man I had loved, the man I had given my heart to, was a phantom, a beautifully crafted lie. My heart didn't break, it shattered into a million icy shards. The pain was so intense it felt like a kind of liberation. No more confusion, no more doubt, just a burning, righteous fury. The quiet power I needed was beginning to stir within me, a dark, exhilarating force. I knew what I had to do. And I knew exactly how I would do it. The plan began to coalesce, driven by a cold, clear logic. My emotions, the humiliation, the profound betrayal, were channeled into a fierce, unwavering determination. Liam had orchestrated a masterful deception, and I would orchestrate an even more devastating revelation. He thrived on public perception, on the image of the brilliant, struggling artist. That, I decided, would be his undoing. I needed to choose the right moment, the right stage, for his grand unveiling. It had to be public, undeniable, and utterly humiliating. I pored over the city's social calendars, looking for an event where both Liam and Eleanor would be present, and where Liam's carefully constructed image would be most vulnerable. The perfect opportunity presented itself. The annual Gala for the Arts, a prestigious charity event where Eleanor was a major sponsor and Liam, leveraging her connections, had managed to secure an invitation, hoping to network with potential publishers and patrons. It was happening in 2 weeks. Enough time. I began to prepare, meticulously. My first step was to discreetly back up all the evidence from both his phones onto an encrypted drive. The texts, the emails, the financial records, every piece of his elaborate double life and his criminal enterprise. Then, I needed to make copies of certain key documents, physical proof that couldn't be easily deleted or dismissed. This involved a carefully timed borrowing of his burner phone and a few quick trips to a late-night photocopy shop. The process was chillingly efficient. My hands, which had once trembled with grief, now moved with a steady, calculated purpose. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were observing myself from a distance, watching a character in a movie execute a complex, high-stakes operation. The internal emotional commentary was still there, a constant hum of hurt and anger, but it was muted, subsumed by the strategic demands of the moment. I found myself thinking about the details of his artistic forgeries. The casual discussions we'd had about famous artists, the way he'd seemed so knowledgeable about techniques and styles. All of it, a performance. He had chosen me, I realized, not just for my affection, but perhaps for my artistic eye, my knowledge of design principles, perhaps even a potential unwitting role in his schemes, had I been less observant. The thought made my skin crawl. But it also armed me with a unique advantage. I understood his world, his language, his vulnerabilities. I would use it against him. The final piece of the puzzle involved Eleanor. I needed to understand her role in all of this. Was she a knowing participant in the forgery, or another one of his victims, albeit a wealthier one? I found a public profile for her, a carefully curated online persona showcasing her philanthropy and her love for the arts. There was no mention of Liam, of course, but the dates of her travels and public appearances sometimes overlapped with his writer's retreats. A picture was forming, a devastatingly clear image of a man who preyed on trust, who twisted affection into a tool for his own gain. And I, Maya, the naive graphic designer, was about to become the brushstroke that would dismantle his entire canvas. With the Gala for the Arts looming, the tension in our apartment became a tangible thing, a tight wire stretched between us. Liam, still oblivious, went about his days with a renewed spring in his step, likely fueled by the anticipation of his impending social triumph. He'd talk excitedly about the guest list, the influential figures he hoped to meet, the potential for his novel to finally gain traction. Each word was a fresh insult, each unsuspecting smile a jab. I, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of suppressed anxiety and grim determination. My creative energy, once channeled into vibrant designs, was now entirely consumed by the meticulous planning of Liam's downfall. I practiced my lines, rehearsed scenarios, visualized the moment of truth. My design skills, honed over years of crafting compelling visuals, were now applied to creating a narrative, a very public one, that would expose Liam for what he truly was. I carefully selected the outfit I would wear to the gala, not something overtly dramatic, but elegant, understated, and powerful. I wanted to look like someone who had just walked out of a very expensive, very exclusive secret, rather than a heartbroken woman. The subtle strength in my demeanor would be a testament to the quiet power I now wielded. I made sure to confirm my attendance with Liam, feigning enthusiasm. "Oh, I wouldn't miss it for the world, darling. So proud of you," I'd gush, my voice betraying none of the acid churning in my stomach. The irony was a bitter taste on my tongue. I even managed a convincing smile when he told me he'd arranged for a private car to take us there, to make a grand entrance. He was still so caught up in his own fantasy, so convinced of his invincibility. This, I realized, was his fatal flaw, his arrogance. He believed he was smarter than everyone, that his elaborate web of lies was impenetrable. He underestimated me, the quiet, artistic girlfriend who just wanted to support his dreams. And that, I knew, would be his greatest mistake. The day of the gala arrived. The city hummed with a different kind of energy, a celebratory buzz that felt strangely disconnected from the storm brewing within me. As I got ready, applying my makeup with a steady hand, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Gone was the confused, hurt girl. In her place was a woman with eyes that held a flicker of steel, a mouth set in a firm, resolute line. The transformation was complete. I was ready. The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was awash in the soft glow of chandeliers, the air thick with the murmur of sophisticated conversations and the clinking of champagne flutes. It was the epitome of refined elegance, the perfect stage for a brutal fall. Liam, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, was beaming, his arm possessively around my waist as we made our grand entrance. He introduced me to various art patrons and gallery owners, his voice filled with a faux pride, an undercurrent of ownership that made my skin crawl. "This is Maya, my incredibly talented girlfriend. A brilliant graphic designer, you know." I offered polite smiles, my mind a vortex of adrenaline and anticipation. Every polite conversation felt like a delay, every minute a step closer to the inevitable. Then, I saw her. Eleanor. She was striking, draped in a shimmering emerald gown, surrounded by a small entourage of admirers. Her laughter, the same brittle sound I'd overheard, cut through the din. She caught Liam's eye, and for a fleeting second, their gazes locked, a silent, knowing exchange passing between them that sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. He gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat signaling the approaching storm. This was it. The moment I had been planning, rehearsing, living for. I excused myself from Liam's side, feigning a need to freshen up. He barely noticed, already distracted by the approach of a renowned art critic. I moved through the crowd, my path carefully plotted, heading straight for the main exhibition hall where a collection of rare, priceless artifacts was on display. I knew Liam would eventually gravitate there, eager to demonstrate his artistic expertise. I found a quiet corner near a particularly impressive marble statue, the perfect vantage point. My hand tightened on the small, discreet USB drive hidden in my clutch. On it, a meticulously crafted presentation. It wasn't just his messages and financial records, it was a curated sequence of images, documents, and recordings that laid bare his art forgery scheme, his double life, and his cruel manipulation of everyone around him. And at the heart of it, a particularly damning photo, Liam, in a private gallery, meticulously altering a famous painting. An unedited masterpiece, a perfect, unassailable piece of evidence. My heart was a chaotic symphony of fear and exhilaration. There was no turning back now. Liam, predictably, arrived in the main exhibition hall, Eleanor trailing casually behind him, a knowing smile playing on her lips. He immediately gravitated towards a particularly famous landscape painting, launching into a verbose analysis of its brushstrokes and historical context, eager to impress the cluster of influential figures gathered around him. He was in his element, a performer on his chosen stage, basking in the attention, completely oblivious to the trap I had meticulously laid. My moment had come. I pulled out my phone, connected it wirelessly to one of the large, strategically placed digital display screens in the hall, screens usually reserved for displaying art information or event schedules. A low hum of confusion rippled through the immediate vicinity as the display flickered, then instead of showing details about the ancient Roman bust next to it, a title card appeared, the true masterpiece of deception, a look at Liam Thorne's art. A ripple of murmuring spread through the room. Liam, still pontificating, paused, a slight frown creasing his brow. Eleanor, beside him, narrowed her eyes, a flicker of apprehension in her gaze. The first image flashed onto the screen, a side-by-side comparison. On one side, the beautiful, original painting he had discovered and brought to a dealer, on the other, a high-resolution photograph of the same painting, taken before his supposed discovery, clearly showing a subtle, yet crucial, alteration. My voice, amplified by a small, discreet microphone I had activated, cut through the murmur, clear and steady. Ladies and gentlemen, we've all been captivated by Liam Thorne's eloquence tonight. He speaks with such passion about art, about authenticity. But perhaps we should discuss his own authentic contributions to the art world. Every eye in the room swiveled towards me, a sea of bewildered faces. Liam's jaw dropped, his face paling, the color draining from it. Eleanor's eyes widened in horror. The show had begun. The silence that followed my opening statement was deafening, punctuated only by the distant murmur of conversation from other parts of the museum, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the main exhibition hall. All eyes, now, were on me. Liam stood frozen, a deer caught in headlights, his perfect facade crumbling with terrifying speed. Eleanor, however, recovered quickly, her face hardening into a mask of cold fury. "What is the meaning of this?" she hissed, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "This is outrageous." But I was beyond caring about her indignation. This wasn't about her. This was about him. "Outrageous, indeed," I said, my voice unwavering, amplified by the microphone. "Just as outrageous as selling forgeries to unsuspecting collectors." The screens behind me flickered again, displaying a series of emails. Receipts for specialized art supplies, highly specific pigments, and even a contact for a known art forger in Eastern Europe. Then, bank statements showing large, unexplained deposits into an offshore account, far exceeding anything a struggling writer could earn. The crowd began to stir, a collective gasp rippling through the elegant gathering. Whispers erupted, escalating into a cacophony of shocked exclamations. Liam, finally finding his voice, lunged towards me. "Maya, what are you doing? This is insane. You're making a huge mistake." His voice was laced with desperation, a pathetic plea. But the fear in his eyes, the absolute terror, was undeniably real. "Insane?" I countered, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "No, Liam, what's insane is living a double life. What's insane is preying on people's trust and passion for art. What's truly insane is believing you could get away with it." And then, the most damning evidence of all flashed across the screens, a video, taken from a hidden camera, showing Liam in a private art studio, meticulously adding details to what was supposed to be a priceless, recently discovered masterpiece. His face, illuminated by the focused light of his lamp, was etched with concentration, not of an artist, but of a meticulous counterfeiter. The murmurs erupted into outright shouts, a symphony of condemnation. Eleanor, her face ashen, turned on Liam, her voice a low, furious snarl. You brought this into my gallery? You risked my reputation for this?" The public exposure was swift and brutal. His carefully constructed world was imploding around him, right before the eyes of the very people he sought to impress. The quiet power I had cultivated had finally found its devastating voice. The video continued to play, a silent, damning indictment of Liam's carefully constructed fraud. The images of him meticulously altering the painting, his focused expression, the quiet intensity with which he committed his artistic crimes, it was all there, undeniable, irrefutable. The sound of Eleanor's furious confrontation with him cut through the escalating chaos in the room. "You absolute fool. You think you're so clever, don't you? Dragging me into this mess." Her voice, once poised and elegant, was now raw with anger, betraying a level of complicity I hadn't fully anticipated. It was clear she was not merely a victim of his charm, but perhaps a knowing, if unwilling, participant in his larger schemes, or at least, someone who understood the implications of his actions far more than I had initially grasped. The security guards, alerted by the commotion, began to move towards Liam, their expressions grim. But before they could reach him, a renowned art critic, a formidable woman with a sharp gaze and an even sharper tongue, stepped forward, her voice ringing out with authority. "Mr. Thorne, for years you've claimed to be on the cusp of a major literary breakthrough, yet all we've seen are vague promises and even vaguer manuscripts. It seems your true talent lies not in writing, but in painting over truths." A ripple of sardonic laughter followed her scathing remark. The humiliation on Liam's face was exquisite. His eyes, darting wildly around the room, finally landed on me, a mixture of disbelief, fury, and a terrifying, dawning realization. The man who had once looked at me with such tender affection now looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. He lunged again, but this time, security intervened, swiftly placing themselves between us. "You bitch," he screamed, his voice hoarse, devoid of the charming cadence I had once loved. "You set me up. You ruined everything." My gaze met his, and for the first time in months, I felt no fear, no hurt, only a quiet, resolute satisfaction. "No, Liam," I said, my voice steady, betraying no emotion. "You ruined yourself. I merely exposed the masterpiece." The arrival of actual police sirens wailing outside the museum solidified the inevitable. The sophisticated facade of the Gala for the Arts, designed to celebrate beauty and authenticity, had become the stage for a spectacular unraveling of deception. As they led Liam away, his head bowed in shame, his once pristine suit now looking rumpled and defeated, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The air, once suffocating with lies, now felt clean, breathable. The narrative arc was complete. The confusion, the hurt, the clarity, they had all converged into this moment of quiet power, a poetic justice that resonated deeply within my soul. I stood amidst the hushed crowd, feeling not vengeful glee, but a profound sense of peace. My heart, though bruised, was undeniably free. In the days and weeks that followed, the story of Liam Thorne's spectacular downfall at the Gala for the Arts became a sensation. It spread like wildfire through the city's art circles, then jumped to national news, eventually becoming a cautionary tale of ambition, deceit, and the fine line between genius and fraud. My name, once just Maya, the brilliant graphic designer and Liam's girlfriend, was now synonymous with the woman who exposed him. There were interviews, requests for comments, even a few offers for book deals, which I politely declined, wanting to reclaim my anonymity. I found a strange sense of vindication in the public narrative. Not for the fame, but for the validation. People saw him for who he truly was, and by extension, they saw me as someone strong, someone who stood up for the truth. Eleanor, it turned out, was not directly involved in the forgery but had indeed been aware of Liam's illicit dealings with stolen art, leveraging her connections to sell legitimate pieces he acquired through dubious means. She faced her own legal troubles, albeit less severe than Liam's, her reputation in tatters. the irony of it all was almost poetic. The very system he sought to exploit had ultimately been the instrument of his undoing. As for Liam, the details of his art forgery scheme unraveled quickly under police investigation. His novel was revealed to be little more than a thinly veiled autobiographical account of his manipulative tendencies, filled with veiled references to his conquests and deceptions. The characters were disturbingly recognizable, some of them real people he had exploited. He was charged with multiple counts of fraud and forgery, facing a lengthy prison sentence. The thought of him, stripped of his charm and his carefully constructed illusions, rotting away in a cell, brought a quiet sense of justice, not triumph, but closure. I avoided any direct contact with him, refusing to engage with his desperate attempts to reach out from behind bars, knowing that any interaction would only serve to pull me back into his toxic orbit. The experience had left scars, undoubtedly. Trust felt like a fragile, elusive thing. But it had also forged something new within me, a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. My creative work, once stagnant, began to flourish. I started focusing on projects that had a deeper meaning, using my skills to help small businesses with ethical practices, working with nonprofits, finding a purpose beyond just commercial success. The city, which once felt like a stage for his lies, now felt like a canvas for my own authentic life. I spent more time with Sarah, who had, with quiet wisdom, been there for me through it all, her "I told you so" unspoken but deeply understood. We'd sit in the daily grind, the coffee shop where it all began, and I'd look at the tables, remembering the first time I saw Liam. A flicker of recognition, but no lingering pain. Only the echo of a hard-learned lesson. Life, in its relentless march forward, began to fill the void Liam had left, not with a replacement, but with new experiences, new strengths, and a renewed sense of self. The media frenzy eventually died down, allowing me to recede back into the quiet rhythm of my own life, albeit one fundamentally altered. My design business thrived, not because of the notoriety, but because I poured my newfound clarity and resilience into my work. I started taking on pro bono projects for local artists, helping them build their brands, creating authentic visual identities that celebrated their true talent. It was a small act of reclamation, a way to mend the artistic world that Liam had so cruelly perverted. The thought of starting another romantic relationship felt daunting, a chasm too wide to bridge. The idea of vulnerability, of opening myself up to another person, felt like stepping onto thin ice. I spent months deliberately avoiding anything that resembled romance, focusing instead on rebuilding my friendships, strengthening my family ties, and rediscovering my own passions outside of a relationship. I painted, something I hadn't done purely for pleasure in years, letting colors and textures express emotions that words still struggled to articulate. I hiked, immersing myself in the vast, indifferent beauty of nature, finding solace in its unchanging rhythms. I learned to cook, not just basic meals, but intricate, challenging dishes that demanded focus and precision, a meditative practice that grounded me. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the sharp edges of the pain began to soften. The constant hum of betrayal quieted to a low thrum. I realized that Liam hadn't taken everything from me. He had, in fact, given me something invaluable, a profound understanding of my own strength, a sharpened intuition, and an unshakable commitment to authenticity. I learned to trust myself again, to listen to the quiet warnings of my gut, to distinguish between genuine connection and artful manipulation. There were still moments, of course, when a fleeting memory would surface, a reminder of the naive girl I once was, or a sudden pang of anger at the sheer audacity of his deception. But they were just moments, passing clouds in a clearer sky. I was no longer defined by what had happened to me, but by what I had done with it. I was a survivor, a thriver, and an artist in my own right, no longer overshadowed by someone else's fabricated brilliance. The quiet power I had found on that dreadful night had transformed into a deep, abiding inner peace. One sunny afternoon, a few years after the Liam debacle, I found myself back at the daily grind, a habit I'd never quite shaken. The aroma of roasted beans and warm pastries filled the air, a comforting scent that spoke of familiarity and routine. I was sketching in my notebook, brainstorming ideas for a new client, when a shadow fell across my page. "Is this seat taken?" a voice asked, soft and hesitant. I looked up. He was tall, with kind eyes and a crooked smile, holding a mug of black coffee, no sugar, no cream. A small, insignificant detail that used to carry so much weight. My heart didn't race. There was no instant, intoxicating pull. Just a quiet, calm assessment. He wasn't overtly charming, not in the way Liam had been, but there was an honesty in his gaze, an open curiosity that was refreshing. We started talking, casually at first, about the coffee, then about our work. He was a landscape architect, he told me, passionate about sustainable design and urban green spaces. He listened intently when I spoke about my graphic design projects, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest, not just a performative attentiveness. There were no grand pronouncements, no promises of a sweeping, perfect future. Just genuine conversation, punctuated by comfortable silences. For the first time in a long time, I felt no need to analyze, no instinct to search for hidden motives or red flags. I simply enjoyed the interaction, the unforced rhythm of it. When he eventually asked for my number, I gave it to him, not with a sense of desperate hope, but with a quiet confidence. There was no rush, no pressure. If something developed, it would be slow, organic, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. If not, that was okay too. My life was full, rich, and meaningful on its own terms. As I walked home that evening, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I felt a gentle warmth spread through my chest. It wasn't the fiery passion that had once consumed me, but something far more profound, a quiet sense of contentment, a subtle optimism for the future. The emotional stakes were different now, lower, yet paradoxically, higher, because they were rooted in self-worth, in a refusal to settle for anything less than genuine connection. The woman who walked into the daily grind years ago, blinded by a superficial sparkle, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more capable of discerning the true masterpieces from the elaborate forgeries. My story wasn't about finding a new love to replace the old. It was about finding myself, and in doing so, opening the door to the possibility of authentic connection, whenever, and however, it chose to arrive.